Hi, folks. It's Heather here, your senior yoga trainer, and today we're going to talk about AM PM yoga. So, what's the difference between an early morning yoga class, a lunchtime corporate class, a late evening class? Is it about the theming, the sequencing, the pacing, the music, the energy? Well, it's about all of the above, really. So, this week we're going to talk about teaching at different times of the day, from early mornings to the post school drop off classes, lunchtime corporates or express classes, the right after work classes, and later evening. My plan for today is to look at how we might expect students to be showing up. What are their needs? What are their goals and their expectations for the class? And we'll also really importantly look at how, as yoga teachers, we can both influence and respond to the energy of the classes through all of those teaching strategies, like the environment we create, how we sequence, how we theme, the way we pace our classes, our tone of voice, and all our timing considerations. Uh, and we'll also talk about how you might manage your own energy as a teacher and make choices based on energy and practical and logistics about the class times that work best for you to be teaching. So it's a lot we're going to cover. I'll try and do it as efficiently as I can. A quick note that I am going to be making some generalizations in this discussion. So keep in mind that every yoga class has its own unique rhythm. Yes, there are some patterns that can be true when it comes to classes at different times of day, and we'll talk about that. But know that your own classes might not stick to those patterns. As teachers, we influence the energy of the class through all of our teaching strategies, but we're not the only ones that are shaping the experience. Our students bring their own energy, shaped maybe by their day, their routines, the time at which they arrive at the mat. And so that's why teaching at different times of day requires us to really be adaptable, to be listening and learning and responding all the time. As a general rule, morning students might need to gently wake up their colder, stiffer bodies, while post work students might be looking to release tension and or shift from work to the ease of rest or leisure. We are going to talk in those kinds of generalizations. And we're going to look at patterns of different class times, the needs of the students, and how we might structure our offerings to meet them where they are at and to give them a really meaningful and inspiring yoga class. So let's talk about the influence of time on class energy and student needs. So, like, think about how does the time of day impact our physical and our emotional and our mental states. So that's something to really take some time to think about. And how can we recognize and adapt to those different student energies? As I said, every class has its own rhythm. Some are really energetic, some are really relaxing, some are fun and playful, some are really technical and structured. And as a teacher, you have some control of that energy and the class culture and the vibes of your class through all of your teaching strategies, your sequencing and theming, your cues, your tone, etc. But again, remember that your students also contribute to the dynamic and the culture of your class. So you should be not just leading, but listening and following as well. And I say all this to preface this discussion about how we can meet our students' needs and perhaps even exceed their expectations for the class. So, when you're thinking about the classes that you're going to teach, whatever time of day it is, early morning, school drop off, lunchtime, evening classes, take some time to think about who are the students attending these classes? What is their experience level? What are their needs? What are their aims for the class? What is the energy at that time of day? And I mean energy in an esoteric sense, but I also mean like, what's the temperature? What's going on in the world? Was it a hectic rush through traffic, or was it an easeful flow on a Sunday afternoon to get into class? So these are all things to kind of be taking into consideration. And you also want to think about how you can plan out a schedule for your own teaching practice that offers multiple types of classes throughout the day or throughout the week, right? So we want to be really observing and thinking about like, how are our students showing up? Are they energized? Are they overstimulated? Are they tired? Are they preparing for the day to come, or are they unwinding from the day that they've had? Are they social and chatty, or are they quiet and inward looking? Are they stiff or flexible? Are they hot or cold? So those are all things that you want to kind of be taking into consideration. You also want to be thinking about how you're showing up, focused or energized or stiff, or, you have to think about yourself in the context of the class as well. You are a part of the class. And we also want to think about, what do our students need at this time of day? Do they need focus? Do they need relaxation? Do they need heating up, or do they need cooling down? Are they needing more technical study or more spiritual study or something in between? So those are all things to really be thinking about when it comes to what you're going to offer in each kind of class. The second thing, sorry, the cat. The second thing to think about is like, who is attending and what are their needs? So who's coming to early morning classes? Think about in where you live, who are those students? Often where I live, they're professionals, they're early risers, sometimes they're parents. The energy that they're bringing to class is like they're waking up, they're a bit cold and stiff. That my students tend to be quieter early in the morning and a lot more inward focused, right? As far as their needs go, early mornings, a lot more gradual warm ups because the body's stiff from having slept and perhaps being cold. And also thinking about a focus for the day ahead. So, gradual warm up, some flow, some awareness of breath and body, and thinking about theming a focus for the day ahead. For mid morning, so post school drop off or mid morning, focused people, often these again are parents, retirees, people with flexible schedules. And the energy at this time of day is that people are a little bit more open and awake. They might be a little bit more social at this time of day. They're definitely looking for movement, but you might find that this cohort is also maybe looking for a little bit deeper study, a little bit more technical study. So, as far as their needs go, thinking about balancing between effort and ease and offering little moments of education, offering a little bit of something more in each class might be something that really reaches your students. For lunchtime classes, these might be corporate classes or, a midday reset or express type of class. Generally, here we're looking at office workers, busy folks who are taking time in the middle of their day. Um, and their energy is often they're like rushing from their desk, mentally overstimulated, but physically, perhaps they haven't moved for quite some time. So, as far as their needs go, number one, we want to make sure we're making efficient use of time, and that our classes have a focus and that there's opportunities for stress relief, right? Movement tends to be more focused on circulation and stretching rather than getting really hot and sweating. Um, And in my classes, it's really my corporate lunchtime students really want to have a good amount of relaxation, but they also need to trust that I'm going to end that class on time so they can get back to their desk. So those are some things to think about for lunchtime classes. For after work classes, this is like a, stressful day. You're making a transition from your work life to your leisure life. Often we're looking at students who are professionals looking to unwind, people looking for stress relief, people looking to have a movement practice. Energetically, often these students are really mentally fatigued, but physically tense. And also, you might find these students to be a little bit emotionally scattered, like the busyness of the day can start to wear on us. So, for those students, grounding can be really important. So, having an amount of flow to move the body and move out all those body brain stress drugs, but also taking time to really ground, to have, um, to release and to make that transition from work life to home life a lot more conscious, coming back into yourself, right? Those are some things you might think about for after work classes. For evening, so these are sort of later in the evening, wind down classes or restorative practice is often what we're looking at here. These are students often looking for deep relaxation, introspection, perhaps more spiritual study. The energy of these classes tends to be slower, more reflective. Often the students coming to these classes are like, this is the last thing they're going to do in the day. So they might be feeling tired and looking for ease. So their needs are perhaps more restorative movements, perhaps a slower pace, a quieter atmosphere than those, sort of more energetic classes earlier in the day, and kind of a sense that we're winding people down into a period of ease and rest and sleep. So, those are some things to think about for later evening classes. So, how do you adapt your teaching? So, there's a couple things to think about when you're adapting yourself and your teaching tools to teaching at different times of day. And that's going to include sequencing and pacing. So, like energizing versus grounding, a slow build versus like getting immediately into movement. Your theming and your cues and your use of imagery. So, you might be setting intention based on your student's state of mind and using cues and imagery and a tone of voice that meets that intention. As far as class culture goes, I think it's useful to know when to encourage interaction and social connection versus when to encourage introspection and quiet. So that's something to think about as well. And of course your own energy management. So showing up fully present at any time of day and what you need to do to ensure that you're able to do that. When it comes to practical strategies, theming. Let's talk about theming. For morning classes, your themes might be oriented around like energizing, setting intentions for the day, like focus, energy, having a fresh start, a new day to pour yourself into, or a new day to experience or get curious about. For corporate classes, theming, you might focus on things like self care, taking time for yourself, de stressing, or themes maybe around like balancing our bodies from the stresses of the physical or mental workspace. So for computer users, for example, getting out of slumpasana posture. For PM classes, you might think about highlighting themes that center on relaxation and reflection and release. So things like letting go or finding balance or softening into ease, those are all great themes for those evening classes. And then your sequencing kind of wants to follow those themes. So with your morning classes, beginning with gentle movements or breath work to kind of awaken the body. So lots of joint movements, spinal movements, and then moving up into more dynamic, energizing flows, sun salutations, standing poses, things that are going to help build heat and build focus. Um, and then ending with poses that are not excessively relaxing, things that give us some time for ease without putting people to sleep. And so those are things to think about for your AM classes. For your lunchtime classes, particularly I'll say corporate classes, these folks often don't want to get super sweaty. So uh, you might include sequencing that balances their bodies. As I said, desk workers, who are in the slumpasana posture can benefit from chest stretches, hip stretches, and just, experiencing some flow, circulating oxygen around the body. Um, in my own experience, my lunchtime corporates, whenever I would ask what they wanted to focus on in class, relaxation was always the number one theme. So I was always sure to plan 20% of my class to be in guided relaxation or silent rest or a combination of the two. So that's something that I really focused on in my own classes. How did I know that? I asked my students, and that's often where we're drawing our ideas from. For evening classes, I think it can be really useful to start with grounding movements. Um, to help us shift from the day's activities, like to have a moment to come back into ourselves before we start doing the next activity. And I think, especially for the later evening classes, incorporating restorative sequences with like longer holds, gentle twists, supported poses that help to calm the nervous system, those are all really beneficial practices to be sequencing into your later evening classes. And of course, a deeper relaxation, guided meditation, yoga nidra, preparing for moving into a time of rest for the evening. So those are all things to think about when it comes to sequencing your classes. So we're going to talk about the environment, the atmosphere that you create. So for morning classes, creating a vibrant atmosphere can be really useful. Natural light, uplifting music, encouraging your students to meet the day with open hearts, right? So things that are energizing without being overexerting. Um, and this is a great time of day to be offering a more lighthearted approach to yoga. Whereas your evening classes, dimming the lights, really soothing music, um, approaching your teaching with a much more calming presence, speaking more slowly, using softer cues, modeling relaxation. And all of this is to help guide your students into a more restful state. And so those are things to think about how you can align your tone, the use of your body, your theming and sequencing with the natural rhythms of the day so that you can create meaningful experiences for your students and meet them where they're at, right? Now, we've talked a lot about meeting your students' needs and energy at these different times of day. Um, Now, it's really important to also talk about you as a teacher. Managing your time and energy, whether you're teaching part time or full time, is really important to the health and longevity of your teaching practice. Um, So choosing classes that meet your students' needs, but also fit well within your own work and lifestyle schedule. Reduce your travel time. Don't impede on your personal and health needs too much. These are all essential considerations. And I want to preface this by saying that you and I may have different lifestyles and experiences. I've been teaching full time for almost 30 years. It's my only job, and I don't have kids or dependents. So I've had a lot more freedom to explore different ways of teaching and the freedom to make choices about when I teach and where I teach. For most teachers, you're going to have maybe some more restrictions in when you can teach or different considerations when it comes to your teaching schedule. And I say all that to say, while I acknowledge the logistical challenges, I don't actually know them. I haven't experienced them. So it's something for you to really take a look at. Um, and think about what's going to fit in your life. Yeah. What I do know is what it's like to try to carve out a teaching schedule living with chronic pain and disability, which requires its own considerations. I'm no longer able to teach in the way that I used to, but I've found a way to make teaching still work for me and my body. And part of how I do that is I still ask myself the same questions that I'm going to pose to you now. So, the first question, when you're thinking about what classes you'll teach, what time of day, um, the first question is really simple. What fits into your schedule? If you work full time and teach a few classes a week, take some time to really work through how's that going to work for you, to get up early to teach, to use your lunch hour to teach, to run classes in the evenings or on weekends. Really take some time to think about the logistics and how you'll manage your time and manage your energy, how you'll organize your days to accommodate, you know, all the things, travel and setup, teaching, pack down, meals and snacks. These are important. And then time to do your admin, your marketing, your sequencing. These are all things that take time and often often require a little experimentation to get the balance right. So it's not that you decide when you're going to teach and that's it for the rest of your teaching career. There's often a lot of playing around with things to figure out what works for you. When you're getting started, you might take some time to plan out a week, see what it looks like, what it feels like, and look for obstacles that you might need to overcome or challenges. And also look for ways to make your week flow smoothly with the addition of your teaching hours. And if you're a yoga teacher in training, one way that you can do this is to plan your study times when you're going to work on your learning at the times that you hope to be teaching. So, say you have an idea for teaching 2 nights a week, Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Make that your study time and commit to that study time and see how it works in your life to spend that time immersed in yoga and how it might impact other areas of your life. You know, things that you might need to work the kinks out of your system before you get into teaching. This is all really good practice. The second question to ask yourself about when you might choose to teach your yoga classes is, when do you have energy? So think about when you have physical, mental, emotional, and social energy to give to others. And if it's possible in your schedule, this is a great time to be teaching. In my own life, I'm an early bird. I'm the clearest and most focused when I'm teaching in the morning. By 5 p.m., I'm kind of stuffed and I start to lose track of my lefts and rights. My mind is less focused. I'm thinking about dinner. And if I keep pushing myself to teach later in the evening, I often then have trouble sleeping, and then that throws the whole life balance off. So for me, morning sessions work best. However, most of us looking for a full-time teaching career can't make that work with only teaching in the morning. So we have to adapt and try out different strategies. Um, and for most of my career, when I was teaching the general public, I had morning and evening classes, and that's where I got my afternoon napping habit from. Is just figuring out how to work with that kind of split schedule. And I'll admit that back in the day, I didn't always build my schedule well. There were days where I would have, 7 or 8 classes and sessions in one day, morning classes, lunchtime corporates, private sessions, and then evening classes. And it wasn't sustainable, of course. But for a short time, it gave me a lot of exposure and experience. And I was then able to pick and choose classes that worked. So I dropped classes where I was stuck in traffic. I dropped classes that didn't allow me any room to eat or rest or go to my own favorite classes as a student. And I kept classes that I felt I could give my best to. Um, and when you first started teaching, you may have less choice. But as you teach and get to learn about your rhythms and what works best for you, and you're building up your teaching practice, you can begin to narrow down the classes that are a best fit. And of course, you also have to consider all your other commitments: work, family care, your own practice. Um, so now is the time to think about what works for you logistically, energetically, and how you can start making some movements towards creating your best schedule. Another really important thing to be thinking about is, what are your needs? And here I'm specifically thinking about your financial needs, because if you're depending on your yoga income, you'll need to make some choices around what classes pay you the best for the time and energy that you put into them. And this isn't always simple, because you want to factor in the time it takes you to travel, the cost of transport, the time for setup, running your class, pack down, getting to your next class. You might have to factor in costs associated with the class: parking, petrol, tolls, taxes. So it's worth taking the time to run the numbers. And you might find that there are some classes that are much more financially viable than others. So again, if you are depending on your yoga income, like someone like me is, it's my only income, this is a really important consideration, right? So don't hesitate to run those numbers. Oh, we've talked about so much. I have some logistical notes though. I think that it's a really good idea at any stage of your career to walk yourself through the logistics around teaching at different times of day and the factors that will add to your timing. So, for example, early morning classes, especially in the winter, you'll have to arrive early to warm up the space. That could be a whole extra hour if it's a cold day in a big space. And you'll also need that time to warm your own body before you begin teaching. So, really think about how early will you need to arrive to those morning classes. For rush hour classes, these are the classes like just before the workday, or just after the workday. Really be aware of how long it's going to take you in rush hour traffic to get to and from your classes. That's something really important to take into consideration. And for PM classes, you'll need to include time to pack up the teaching space. If you're the last class of the night in the studio, there's a little extra cleaning and tidying to do. There's closing up the venue. And there's also, think about, establishing boundaries. Along with those duties, establishing boundaries about how long people will stay after class to chat. If you finish your class at 9 p.m., you don't want to still be in the studio at 10 p.m. chatting with students. So, starting with, some boundaries around when you want to leave the studio and make your way home. So, those are just some logistical things to really think about. Whew, this has been a lot. Okay. I wanted to be efficient. I hope I was. We've covered a lot today on meeting your students where they're at, providing theming and sequencing and rest and environments that best suit all these different times of day. Um, Paying attention and responding to their needs is going to help you create amazing yoga experiences. So that's the thing that you want to have top of mind. But we've also talked about paying attention to your needs and to how you're responding to teaching at different times of the day and when you can give your best. So that's another thing to keep considering. And remember, as you develop your teaching practice, you can keep tinkering with your schedule and create a schedule that best fits your needs and when you can be delivering your best for your students and getting the most out of your yoga teaching practice. So those are all my thoughts. If you have questions, if you have concerns, I'm here to help. I hope that this has been of use for you. If you want any of these strategies in writing, head over to the blog at yogatrinity.com and I'll have transcript notes there for you if you want to be grabbing a few of these ideas to put into your own plans. Thank you very much for being here with me today, and I look forward to seeing y'all next week. Thank you.